Hey, everyone, it's Isaiah. Welcome. This is another episode of Isaiah's Inspiring Evening podcast. And I'm really excited tonight. We have an amazing guest. Before I go into presenting the amazing Michelle Ann Collins, I would like to remind you that now we have various series in the podcast. And this is a Things Women Don't Talk About episode. We are going to talk about topics that we usually avoid, whether they are too serious, too sacred, too dark, too taboo, or whether they are too fun, too mundane. No subject is off the table in these episodes. And Michelle has got a topic that is one of the difficult types, the ones that we sometimes want to avoid. We're going to be talking about grief, about mindfulness around grief, and how to inhabit our joy. So, welcome, Michelle. Hi there.
Hello, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, before we go and start talking, I would like to present a little bit more of Michelle. And so, let me read the thing and not pretend that I'm inventing it as I go. So, as the founder of Inhabit Joy, Michelle Ann Collins partners with individuals who have suffered grief, injury, or other types of loss as they recover and build resilience for life's inevitable challenges. After a series of devastating losses, including her husband's suicide, Michelle combined the tools she had collected as a yoga therapist and wellness coach and studies in positive psychology, neuroscience, meditation, and mindfulness to turn post traumatic stress disorder into post traumatic growth. I love that. With the addition of certifications in grief education and grief yoga, and several best selling books in which she shares her story, Michelle helps others transform from barely surviving to joyful thriving. Michelle teaches and coaches in private, corporate, and small group settings and enjoys sharing her skills and experience through speaking and facilitating workshops and retreats. Deeply connected with the healing powers of nature, Michelle spends her leisure time hiking among the trees or paddling the rivers near her home in Portland, Oregon, USA. So that's it. We've got a nutshell of who Michelle is. Obviously, nothing can sum up a life, mostly one that has been so eventful as yours. But yeah, this bio really kind of took me in. So it's like, okay, we're into the subject immediately. Because it seems that this topic is linked with your life. With, it's not like it's something that you far-fetched.
Yeah, I studied it from the inside out, so to speak.
Yeah. But also from the outside in, because you went and did some research. It's not just I've been through it and then I can talk about it.
Right.
But it's really the universe was looking after me, because when we programmed this episode, I thought I knew about grief, like we all do, from a remote place. And in between then and now, I've been made more familiar as I've lost someone that it's not that much that this person was close to me, but the ripples on people that were close to me. And so, yeah, you were kind of, if I understood correctly, you were at some point in the center of the tornado of grief. I feel like I'm in the surroundings. Sorry, I'm doing gestures, but people listening won't do it. So, do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about how you got thrown at the center of the tornado?
Sure. Yeah, and that's actually a very good analogy. It's something that I use myself. I've even written about that in my books, that it's, imagine a hurricane or a tornado going through, and as much as it might take your house out, you're the primary mourner, your next door neighbors have a lot of damage too. So those are the people who knew your loved one and had a relationship with your loved one. So I do use that
that's interesting.
analogy a lot, because say it only ripped off your roof, you still have a roofless house to deal with, but your next door neighbor, who was the person who lost their spouse, doesn't have anything, completely devastated. So it is a really good way to think of it, to try to get some perspective, because that's the hardest thing of all to understand. When you're in so much pain, or your best friend is in so much pain, and you want to do what you can to help them, yet you're suffering too. So you're not at your best. It's complicated supporting someone in grief. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I got roundabout to answer your question. I
all right.
got here, I was the early, 2010s. I went through a divorce, and then I met my second husband, and we had this whirlwind romance and got married 90 days after we met. And we were just completely head over heels for each other. And I didn't know at the time that he was struggling so much with some mental illness, possibly PTSD, possibly from traumatic brain injury. We'll never actually know what it was, the why. But he ended his life when we had been together just 2 years.
Wow.
And yeah, so that put me in the middle of the tornado. My life was completely demolished by the situation. Leading up to his death, there was a lot of very irrational times, a lot of discomfort and out of control times, and then after he died, just pure devastation. And I want to touch here on the things we don't talk about, because many suicidals feel not just horrific guilt, shame, grief, sadness, anger, but oftentimes, and this is what we don't talk about, we feel relief. Relief, because if you live with someone who's threatening suicide, you are on pins and needles every day, worrying about every single thing that might happen, that is happening, that has happened. And once your loved one dies, one of the feelings that you might come up with is relief, because it's over. There's no changing it. It's terrible. It's the worst pain I can imagine. But we talk about the pain. I hope everyone out there is talking about the pain. We don't talk about the idea that there may be some relief with it. In my case, he had threatened to harm me and my daughters. And so I had the relief of knowing that wasn't going to happen. Now, that was, you can be relieved and devastated.
Yeah.
You can be relieved and traumatized. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
There might be immediately some guilt around feeling relief on top of it.
Oh, for sure. Kind of yeah.
So then that's why we don't talk about it, because
exactly.
Yeah.
And I lost my mom.
Or relief might not be.
Right, exactly. But what I try to impart to people who I work with in grief is that any feeling that you have is okay. As long as you're not doing self-harm or harming others, neglecting yourself or neglecting someone you need to care for, whatever you feel is fine. Feel your feelings. And the best way to move through feelings is to feel them, to face them, and recognize them and shout them out loud, or share them with a therapist or a coach.
Yeah. I was saying earlier, before we started recording, one of my very best friends just lost her husband after a very brief and very, very devastating illness, and he would not get help. He thought that he was going to be cured magically, kind of. And she has at this minute so much anger, because it's like, and immediately, just after, she said, "I'm angry." And she looked at me like, "Are you going to be judging me?" And I said, "Welcome, you have whatever, anyway, you can't harm him anymore. He's dead now. the rest of the people just ignore them, feel your feelings, do whatever. And I think that it's of course it's relevant on the topic of grief, but it's relevant in general. The idea that we can suppress our feelings because they're not convenient, polite, expected, or whatever is just a stupid idea, to my belief. And mostly in this terrible moment of the loss. On top of that, the idea that we should not only have lost and be in this turmoil of a tornado, wherever you are situated in this tornado, but on top of that, you should behave. Come on, this is ridiculous. Like, it's like, sorry, what? Seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, we're humans, we're not robots. And not only is it, yeah, I find that ridiculous, but also harming to the person who, is kind of not allowing her whole things to be expressed at any moment. And I love reading in your bio about the nature thing. For me, I go outside and I scream when I'm really, really angry at something, because the trees don't mind, basically. They're fine with me screaming. And then I don't scream at my children or my husband, or,
Good.
And so I think there are many ways, obviously, that you can express the feelings, as long as you were saying we don't harm ourselves or others. We have to find ways to allow the emotions to be in motion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I took a certification in grief yoga, and it's basically emotional expression using sound and movement. You're going, ha, or you're whatever, to move emotion through your body, and movement to move emotion through your body. It's there's not a whole lot of yoga in grief yoga, but it's the idea is that it's a mindful movement. And one of the things we do is hit pillows,
Yeah.
and you have to do it carefully so you don't hurt your hand, or your wrist. But it's so healthy to be able to express your emotions with physical movement, because in yoga philosophy, which is one of the things I follow and study, your emotions aren't separate. Your mind and body aren't separate.
Yeah.
And so when you have an emotion like anger or grief or fear, there is a corresponding physical sensation. And we're, in our culture, our modern culture, we're so disconnected from that. But one of the things you can learn through grief yoga, I learned through yoga therapy, and also in my trauma therapy when I was going to trauma therapy after my husband died, was to find those sensations in my body and then work with them with the breath or with movement or with mindfulness to move them through. And one of my teachers even said, if you don't work that through, it will turn into disease. So dis-ease, right, is uneasiness. But then if you let it sit there, in your belly, you can get an ulcer, right? Or if you can get high blood pressure or heart disease from having unprocessed emotions, from being too stressed out.
That very, very strongly. From grief or basically from whatever. But what happens, I'm guessing, I'm not guessing actually, I'm just remembering that when I experience grief first degree, I would say, close to me, the emotions get a peak. It's like there's suddenly so many emotions. So it's a good time to see if I've learned and I can manage to express those emotions and to put them into motion, or if I'm stuck, because you can't avoid seeing them or feeling them or halfway through feeling them at that moment.
Right. There are mindfulness practices you can do to get out of the cycling that we do, where you're, for example, when you're startled by something, your body has a corresponding reaction, right? Your heart rate goes up, cortisol goes up, your immune system gets shut down, your digestion, all of these things. This is a description of the physiology of fight and flight. And what we can do with mindfulness, if you bring that in, is as soon as you're startled by something and then your body does its thing and you realize you're safe, you can stop the cycle by doing, breath work or some kind of mindful movement or whatever tool you have in your toolbox. If you don't stop it, then it can actually upcycle. And so you get more and more, and then you get what's called a limbic hijack. So then your limbic part of your brain, which is one of the earliest parts of our brain, right, to develop evolutionarily, takes over. And then you kind of lose your reason and you might do something you regret later. So it's really important to be able to interrupt that cycle.
There's one thing to express the emotion and another one to fall into the repeat cycle. So I actually felt myself going there slightly when my friend died a month ago. I took me a week or so, and then I wrote a blog post because I have this tendency to write my things. So I write myself through whatever, and the thing that came was, this is not mine to carry. So I was in a cycle of grief, and then it was like, oh, just wait a second. This is not my grief. I'm here partly carrying somebody else's grief, which is very honorable of me, but completely useless, both for me and the other person.
That's so well said. That is so well said.
And so I just decided, okay, no, it's not mine to carry. It's really tough for her, but this is her burden for now. My husband is well, alive and kicking, hopefully. I'm saying hopefully because I'm in
last
Greece
time you checked.
Yeah, the last time I checked this afternoon, he was all right. But it's really also I feel that these big emotions, when they come, there is a tendency to get overwhelmed and not really understand who they belong to. My father died a few years back, rather unexpectedly, not completely unexpectedly, but rather unexpectedly. And my father and my eldest son had a huge and very close relationship. And I could feel that I was angry at my father because I did not have a good relationship with him. So I was angry because he died before we could fix things, basically. But I could feel the sadness of my son. And I was kind of mixing both up until I literally had to take a few steps back and say, what is mine and what is not? Because we cannot grieve for other people, can we? Oh, did I freeze again?
Nope, you're unfrozen now.
Okay. So yeah, but you're the expert. I seem to be doing all the talk, so let me shut up.
No, but what you're saying is so valuable. I mean, you're the expert in your experience, right? And like the name of your podcast, so many people aren't going to say that they're angry at somebody who died, even if they're feeling that anger, because death is sacred. And we go to the the funeral or the memorial service and we only say good things about this person. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody who was all good, right? Who never annoyed any other person. I mean,
now that is called an angel.
Right. Okay. But we don't go to
exactly.
So it's really important to touch on these topics and make it real. That grief is messy, just like life and every relationship that you have. It's messy. There are harder times and easier times. There are thoughts that you have when you're in grief that are horrifying, and there are thoughts that are just hard. And there's a lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda, especially with suicide loss. What if, but there's guilt with most grief. It's not just suicide loss. Many people who go through grief due to the loss of a loved one feel guilt because they still feel like they could have done something different to maybe to make their loved ones passing easier, or they couldn't fix their relationship before their person died, so it's all of the mess that needs to be looked at and felt.
There is just as much mess when life is born than when we die.
Right.
The only thing is, when somebody's born, the mess is happy mess.
Right, and their babies are very cute.
Yeah. Yeah, but still there's blood and there's life-threatening situations, and but we're giving ourselves permission to be happy about that and to be okay with the mess, because it brings life. Whereas when in death, we also have this, it should be proper, or it should not be messy. It seems like we have a lot of shoulds as a society, I mean.
Yeah.
And also, I believe that, sorry, go on.
That makes it harder. Shoulding, I always tell my clients, and when I'm speaking, I always say, don't should on yourself. And especially if it's in the past tense, you can't change the past. You can be mad about it, but there's nothing you can do about it. It happened. It's over. So go from here and stop shoulding on yourself.
A completely disempowered place to trying to fix the past. I cannot, and so I have no power over the past, and the only thing that it can bring me is a feeling of powerlessness, of being unable to do anything. Yeah, absolutely. Now, if I dare, I'm going to ask you, when did you realize that you were going to become a grief specialist?
Great question.
Kind of,
yeah. I love that question. Actually, it was it wasn't like a light switch. It was a very slow, methodical process. And the way it happened was, I'm a learner. Whatever happens, now I look it up on Google, but in the old days, I'm going to buy every book on the subject. I'm going to read it all because I want to be knowledgeable, because to me, knowing about something makes me more powerful. It empowers me. So after Glenn died, I had already been through a big grief in the loss of my mom. My mom was my number one person in my life for my whole life. And so when she died, I thought I would never go through anything as traumatizing again. I thought I had skills and tools. And then 9 years later, Glenn dies by suicide. And I was back in, the unknown. I don't know what to do. I did not know what to do. And so I just started, reading some books and listening to some podcasts. And it took a while. It took a long time. And writing, I also write like you do. I wrote my stories, trying to make some sense of it. And writing is such a helpful tool for that. And then I found this grief educator course that one of the books I was reading was by David Kessler, who's a world-renowned grief expert. And when I read his book, it's called Me Feel So Much Better. It just made me feel better. I was just had ease after reading his book. In some ways I didn't before. So then I found out he was offering this grief education course. And are you still with me, Saya?
Yes, no, I'm absolutely here.
Okay.
Sorry. My bandwidth seems low, so I've got my camera so that we can hear you and you can hear me well as well too. Because otherwise it seems that my bandwidth is going on and off. So you don't have my face, but full attention.
Okay, just making sure. So David Kessler was offering a grief educator certification, which was many months, many hours. I don't remember exactly how many hours. And I wanted to take it in order to learn more about grief. And I have to tell you, I took it about 5 years after my husband died. And there was some shame and guilt and insecurity that was still there. until I took this course. And it allowed me, I mean, there'll always be a little bit because I'll always be healing from that loss, but learning about it in sort of an academic way, having, you know, study partners and small groups, and being able to observe grief counseling over and over and over again really taught me to be able to be with my grief. And at that point, I was already a wellness coach, already a yoga therapist, like I had mentioned. And it happened, right? All of a sudden, the coaching clients that were coming into my world were in grief. And you know, I was using the yoga, the wellness coaching, the mindfulness tools, and now I had grief educator tools, and it just worked. I was able to help people, and I feel like there are so few of us in the world who can sit with the grieving, who can be fully present, and that makes you a healer if you're fully present with someone who's grieving. And when I discovered that I could do that, I felt like I had to do that. I felt like now, you know, I'm the chosen one, or one of the chosen 100,000 or whatever, who is actually willing and able to be with someone in grief. And my practice just shifted. I still work with clients just solely yoga therapy or wellness coaching, you know, weight loss, get in the gym, sleep better, you know, the general wellness stuff. But more and more and more, I am working with those in grief and speaking and writing about grief. I've spoken at a couple of widows conferences and loss conferences, and so, yeah, it just kind of happened. It wasn't like I just
like
one day said, hey, I'm going to go into grief work.
Now I was thinking, you know, about there's a Chinese saying, I think that is Chinese, I'm not sure, maybe it's Zen. When the student is ready, the master appears. So with you, it was kind of the reverse. When the master was ready, the students appeared. So you were ready for it, and then the clients came, and it, I think the universe was sending you whatever you needed and they needed as well. It's amazing.
Right. And another point I do have to make that was not within my control was the books that I wrote that were both published last January were regarding spouse or partner suicide loss. And then the one, I think it might help you, my second book is called Supporting a Survivor of Spouse or Suicide Loss. Because even though your friend's husband didn't die by suicide, there's a lot in there to help people understand how to be with someone who's in, you know, severe acute grief. So those books were not a choice. I was basically told by whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, angels, spirit, my higher self. I had it wasn't a calling, it was a telling. And it was almost audible. I was told to write the first book, and I tried to avoid it for 5 years. I contributed to 3 other books during that time, talking about my experiences and my education. And then finally, I wrote the Surviving Spouse or Partner Suicide Loss book, and it's based in mindfulness. And the day I turned that book into my publisher, like the manuscript's done and it's ready for the editing and the production and all that, which is a big, long process. So it's not like it was ready to publish or anything. That night, I went to bed with such a feeling of accomplishment. And I get another message from source, the source of the message that told me I had to write the first book, saying I have to write a companion book for people who are supporting survivors. And I couldn't have had one night.
1 week, 1 night to 1 week, please.
No.
Can I rest for a while?
I mean, it had that night. Are you kidding me? Yeah. But so my point is that sometimes it's a choice and sometimes it's a being told by a source, an unnamed source.
That you were listening.
So, oh, I tried not to. And actually, I wrote about that in the You Can't Make This Story Up book. I wrote, my chapter is about how hard I tried to not write that book. And it actually made me sick, like physically sick, to go against the command of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do it.
I
And
know
I
the
did.
feeling.
And then I had to write the second one. But the second one was really easy because I was like, oh, okay, I'll do this. And I just did it. You know, there was no like, I don't want to write a book about
Mhm.
suicide
Yeah,
loss.
you're not fighting anymore.
Right. I knew better by then. So I just,
Yeah, no, sometimes the universe can be adamant, and it's just like,
oh, yeah, I will
you go,
never
girl,
ignore a
because
call. I will never ignore one again, ever. I've learned.
but you do still work with clients. I mean, you're not just speaking to groups or writing books. You still have a
Oh, yeah,
private practice. And do you
absolutely.
feel
It's
that
one of my favorite parts of what I do.
you are let's put it this way, always doing the same thing, or is it completely different from one person to the other?
Yeah, that's another great question. It is different because everyone in grief is different. Every body is different. Everyone arrives to their grieving with a different history, a different set of practices. Some people have never meditated in their lives. Some people have, misuse of food or drugs. And so in order to fully grieve, you need to fully feel. In
Mm-hmm.
order to live in joy again, you need to go through the grief. And it's actually, that's what I love the most about my work, is because it is such a variety. Every single person is different ages, different losses, and finding what works for them to be able to go through the process and come out the other side knowing that there is life and love and joy still to be had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. It's really very gratifying.
So, but what if I hear it correctly, you're saying that it's all different. There's one non-negotiable, and that is we have to feel our feelings.
Yeah, that is
However
non,
we
yes,
manage it, however we can,
right.
however we know how to, or we need to learn. But grief is not, this is the one thing that we can't bypass.
Yeah, you if you want to live fully, and this is David Kessler says this all the time, and I love this. If you want to live fully, you need to grieve fully. You cannot skip over grief and then still have a full heart.
Push it under the carpet, the bits
Yeah,
that I
and I
don't like.
liken it to a broken leg, for example.
Mm,
Really something everyone can just kind of see it, right? You broke your leg, you get a cast or surgery or
mm,
whatever you need, and then you are required by the doctor to don't weeks or keep your walking cast on for 6 to 8 weeks. It takes a certain amount of time. And with grief, it's way more broad than bone healing. Bone healing is like 6 to 12 or something. But with grief, we don't have a cast.
mm.
Are not always educated about what we're going through. They're like, hey, let's go do this. Whereas if you had a cast on your leg, someone would say, hey, let's go hiking. You're ready to hike the next day, right? You're ready to work time. So it's important to understand that grief is like an injury, and it needs attention and nurturing
Mhm.
and learning about how to live your life with your broken leg, all of the modifications you need to make in your daily life, and then slowly healing through it. And unfortunately, grief takes longer than a broken bone, but you get the idea.
Yeah, no, I like it's very I'm a very visual person, so I can see the cast, and I can I think it's a great recommendation. Kind of treat yourself as if you were wearing a cast of grief, and then take the time. And that was going to be my next
Mm-hmm.
question around time. And before I go into the question, it's like, as you said, it's broader. For me, what I've experienced is that there's also a rebound effect, as in I personally, I was in a deep period of grief. At some point, people seem to be dying left and right, literally, for 3 or 4 years in my life. It's like, why? Like a group of people. And each grief kind of rekindled the previous one. It was like I was on a roller coaster of re-going through the same motions. And that's why also I think that for me, there is no time frame. There is no freaking time frame. Sometimes I feel that I'm perfectly fine. And then sometimes my father's death, which was 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, still feels like it's yesterday and like it's sorted. And so it's like, contrary to bone healing, it doesn't go on a steady, gets better every day situation. You can, at least my experience is I got thrown back in the deep end of the freaking pool several times.
Right. And when you have another loss, like you mentioned, having so many losses, it can put you back to that place of loss of, last time you lost someone. And yeah, I think that as far as time goes, some of it is the amount of effort you put into it. Being able to really take that time to feel the feelings, to regain your faith that life goes on, that there is love and joy. And some of it is just time.
Yeah.
So it's a combination, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
Because just again, it depends on.
Just waiting without doing the work won't do the thing.
Right.
Just doing the work and wanting to fast forward the work won't do it either. It's both, if I hear you.
Exactly. I do not believe time heals all wounds. I believe time and effort will get you to the point where you can rediscover a fulfilling and joyful life, and that we always miss our loved ones, that grief doesn't end. Again, quoting David Kessler, who seems to be quite the celebrity in our conversation today,
oh gosh, I lost you completely here. Would you mind repeating the last bit? Because I didn't catch it, and I'm afraid it won't be on the recording.
The other kids, because they were all significantly older than me. And when I still can feel, I feel the pain of a 6-year-old. It's not the same pain that I felt when my mom died. Certainly not the same as when my husband died, but it's still there. You have this feeling of something missing. And what you learn to do when you manage your grief in a healthy way is you learn to recognize, oh, I'm missing my person right now. And then you learn, how can I nurture myself through this difficult time?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, because there's, I'm guessing, I'm just thinking about that. You tell me if I'm right or wrong, or if that makes any sense, that there might be also a guilt about letting go of grief. As in, I'm feeling better now. Oh my God, I'm not even missing my person. What a bad woman I am, kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I actually have a story about that. The first time I felt joy after my mom died. And I immediately went into just profound guilt. Even, I had this moment of joy. And I think we just need to reframe it. And this is another reason why it's so important to speak to someone who's learned about grief, to reframe it, and that your loved one, what would they want? They would not want you to sit in a dark room and cry for the rest of your life. You're alive. You have a life to live. And being able to go out and have joyful moments and find more love to sort of make the pain of loss a little bit less, that's your birthright. And when your loved one died, you didn't. And we need to remember that we are still here, and pursuing joy and happiness and a fulfilling life is a necessity as a human being, and our loved one would want that for us. So
Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. I'm here in Greece, and half of my lineage is Greek. And in Greece, it's customary for women, note, not for men, when they lose somebody, whoever in their family, the closer, obviously, the worst, they start wearing black. And they wear black forever. So I know women who started wearing black when their parents died, as in when they were 25, and they're now 85, and they never changed because there's always somebody else dying, right? So it's kind of, you're supposed to wear
is there
black
an
for 5.
end period? Is it wear black for like a
So
year or a month,
it
or it's
depends who
forever?
dies. It depends who
Oh,
dies.
okay.
Traditionally, the period is longer the closer the relative who died, or the person, the closer you were to the person. So that means that sometimes it's like a never-ending story, and you see all those amazing pictures with women dressed in black in islands, in beautiful Greek islands, and it's like, oh, they're so typical. No, they're not typical. They're condemned to be in permanent mourning, which I think is, they never get out of it. Their life half dead because so many people died. But well, people die a lot.
Yeah.
Just as many as people are born. There's
Are they
literally so many.
also allowed, are they allowed to remarry or have another child or
Traditionally,
be
no.
joyful?
Remarry, no. So,
That's
now,
so
obviously,
sad.
this is 2024. We're talking about a civilization that is getting more modern, but traditionally, no, they would mourn. I had a godmother who was Greek, and she lost her husband 3 months after they got married in the Second World War. She never remarried, never had a child, and dressed in black all her life. And it's like, oh my God, why?
So her whole life was grieving. Oh, that is so
Grieving
sad.
somebody that she, had met and for 3 months. So, that she didn't even know, basically.
Yeah.
So I think it's and in the Greek ideology, let's put it this way, this is considered heroism or, great. I disagree very, very profoundly. This is a sacrifice, a useless sacrifice.
That
Because
is a tough tradition.
because the dead people don't benefit from us being sad and not living.
Well, and society doesn't benefit either, because she could have had, gone on to have a successful, loving, full life and maybe had 6 Greek babies,
Absolutely.
and one of them might have grown up to be president or prime minister or something.
Absolutely. But, I can tell you that from being from various European countries and having traveled quite a lot, this is what we have historically been taught to, on the whole, mostly for women, is that grief, loss, mourning, this is our cross to bear. And I'm using that, and it's really, as you were pointing out very nicely, useless for the person, useless for society, obviously useless for the dead person even more. But it's, I think there's a weight of that in our everyday life in Europe. And I'm really hoping that people in America or in Australia, where you have less of this weight of history, hopefully, you learn to grieve in a more healthy way, both for yourself.
Well, I
and
think
for
it's
society.
important, again, back to the education piece, right? People don't know what to do. I mean, if you work for a big corporation, a lot of times you have 3 days off for bereavement leave. And then you go back and you're broken and you don't know what to do. And, I was raised Jewish, and the Jewish tradition I love. It's very, very focused. The first week, you don't do anything. You basically lay on the floor and cry. I mean, we bury them in 1 to 2 days. So the funeral is not anything that is a big planned event, right? You just, everybody comes together. And then that first week, you don't have to do anything. Everybody comes and takes care of you, feeds you, I had little kids when my mom died, took my kids to school, all of that. And then after the first week, you go to synagogue or some prayer group, and you do a morning prayer, MOUR, prayer of morning, every week for the first month, and then every month for the first year. I mean, you can go every day if you want, but during that time, when that prayer is said during the service, you stand up, and anyone in mourning stands up. So the entire community is reminded that you had this, and it's the primary mourners, right? So it's the children, spouses, siblings, parents.
Yeah.
So these people need our support. Look at who's standing up in synagogue. And then after the first year, we have a ceremony called the unveiling, which in the old days, when everyone was buried in the ground, was the time that the headstone was uncovered. That's why it's called the unveiling. You have a very, traditional ceremony, and you are released from your mourner's requirements. And then once a year, you go and observe the anniversary of their death. It's called the yard site. So I think it's so beautiful, because for a year you are seen everyone in the community is reminded that you need support. And then after the year ends, you can rejoin society in any capacity. You can remarry, you can go to celebrations. During that year, you're not to go to like weddings or bar mitzvahs or anything like that. And it's just, I think it's so wonderful, because it allows people to understand how to behave. And to honor their grief, be supported, and then re-enter life instead of wearing black for your whole life, which makes me really sad.
Yeah, me too. We're coming close to the end of our talk today, which is annoying, because I think that's fascinating. But I wanted to ask one last question, and that is about, I've been very careful with you to pronounce the word death, dead, and died. And one of the things that really annoys me is when people even avoid the word, and they go for he passed away, or he has left us. In French we say, and it's like, I feel that there is something, again, not efficient, not useful in avoiding. Again, am I making any sense? Would you agree with that?
No, 100%.
You have to face the words to start with.
Yes. And on top of that, if it's a suicide loss, people just can't talk. He took his life. He ended his life. We've changed from committed. It used to be committed suicide, which is very easy to stigmatize, because committed is like committed a crime. So we say died by suicide now. But I think what I think is the most important. Yes. Oh, okay.
You say, I suicided myself, kind of, or he suicided himself.
I've heard that too.
Which is nice, because it means that there is no crime involved, and there is no sorry, how do you say that? It still maintains the idea that it was of their own volition. Of their own. Sorry, but
I have heard people say suicided. I have heard that, turn it into a verb. But I think as far as died goes, people have so much trouble talking about death in the first place. If someone told me that their loved one passed on, or is no longer here, or something like that, and that's the way they are able to express it, I would not comment. I wouldn't say to them, you really need to talk about death, because that's what's happened.
People grieve how they can.
Yeah.
But what I find annoying is when I'm not grieving and I'm talking about somebody who died, and I can't say the word, and I go for he has left us, but he's not left anyone, he just died.
Right. And it's softer, right? Because he could have left to go to the grocery store. So it's not very clear. It's not very clear, and it's not very efficient to say anything other than they're dead or they died, but it is also, you have
I
to
think at
be in
some
the
point,
right place to be
for
able
me,
to do it.
yeah, absolutely. No, judge. I please, I was, if anyone understood that, I was not judging anyone who says I passed away, he passed away or something. It's just, for me, it seems like a nice way to, again, not face the emotion that death can make me feel. So the
Yeah.
sadness, the deep sorrow, the not understanding what that means, that somebody's dead. And
Right. And that's a whole thing. I know we're out of time, but we could have a whole other conversation about what people believe happens after you die.
yeah,
And that sometimes informs people's grief, right? If you
yes,
believe, if you have a very strong faith that there is a God and that your soul of your loved one is with God, that can take some of the sting out of,
yeah,
some of the, oh, my loved one is dead, but they're with God.
yeah.
So there are people who, can be very comforted.
Find comfort, yeah, obviously, which, if that is their faith, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll really have to stop because I promised my people that I won't talk too much, basically. So thank you very, very much for being here. Let me remind everyone that they can find the links to your books, to your social medias, to your website below or above this video or audio, wherever they're looking or listening to us. And that I highly recommend you go and read Michelle's books and kind of see the part of life when people die as a part of life and not as a definite for you, because you're not dead if you're buying the book.
No.
Thank you very much for being a guest. I hope we get to talk again. And yeah, I'm so excited that this idea that I had about things women don't talk about is getting to become true, and that we talk about more and more of the difficult subjects, because the difficult subjects are where we can grow. So
Totally
thank you very
agree.
much.
Thanks so much for
working
having
with
me.
on this one. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
As for the listeners, lots of love and talk to you soon. Bye for now.